The contract burns against her chest like a brand, the blood-stained parchment crackling with each ragged breath as Syrah crashes through the thorned wilderness. Her bare feet leave crimson trails on the frost-bitten earth, each step a lightning bolt of agony that shoots up her trembling legs, but she doesn't stop. Can't stop. The howls behind her grow closer, hungrier, and she knows with bone-deep certainty that when they catch her native, when there won't be mercy waiting in those amber eyes, thunder splits the sky above her like the world itself is tearing apart, and the rain that's been falling for hours turns to ice-cold sleet that stings her face and plasters her dark hair to her skull. The storm mirrors everything churning inside her chest, the rage, the terror, the absolute devastation of what just happened, what was done to her, what she allowed to happen because she was too weak, too trusting, too desperate to believe that maybe, just maybe, someone would choose her for once. The auction block was still warm from her tears when they dragged her away. She can still feel the rough wood under her knees, still hear the voices of the bidders calling out numbers like she was livestock, like she was nothing more than flesh and bone to be bought and sold. Her father's gambling debts had finally come due, and she was the payment. The blood debt her family owed demanded a life, and her father, the man who was supposed to protect her, love her, put her before everything else in this world, had handed her over like she meant nothing. A branch whips across her face, leaving a stinging cut on her cheek, but Syrah barely feels it. The physical pain is nothing compared to the hollowness in her chest where her heart used to be, where her faith in family used to live, where her belief that she mattered, that she was worth something, had been ripped out by the roots and left bleeding in the dirt. Her silver-streaked wolf stirs beneath her skin, restless and angry, begging to be released. The shift would be so easy right now. Just let go. Let the change take her. Let her wolf form carry her faster and farther than these human legs ever could. But she forces the transformation down with every ounce of willpower she has left. Too dangerous. Too many people know what she is now, what she can become, and using her wolf form would be like sending up a signal flare telling them exactly where to find her. The memories crash over her in waves, each one more brutal than the last. Standing on that platform with iron shackles around her wrists while strangers examined her like she was a horse they might buy, the auctioneer's voice booming across the crowd as he listed her qualities: young, unmated, carrier of rare bloodline. The way the bidder's eyes stripped her bare, calculating her worth down to the copper coin, and then he walked in, the Lycan King himself, moving through the crowd like death in expensive clothes. Kieran Blackthorn, the alpha who ruled the northern territories with an iron fist and a heart colder than Winterstone. She'd heard stories about him her whole life, how he'd killed his own brother for the throne, how he collected rare wolves like other men collected art, how he showed mercy to no one and nothing. His pale gold eyes had found hers across that crowded room, and for one insane moment, she thought she saw something flicker there. Recognition, maybe, or hunger, but not the kind of hunger the other bidders had. This was something deeper, darker, more complicated. Like he'd been waiting for her specifically. The bidding war that followed was vicious and swift. Numbers flying through the air like arrows, each one higher than the last, until finally the auctioneer's gavel came down with a sound like a coffin lid slamming shut. Sold to the Lycan King for a sum that would clear her father's debts and leave him comfortable for the rest of his miserable life. The word "sold" might as well have been branded across her forehead in red-hot iron, because that's how it felt. Like she'd been marked, claimed, reduced to nothing more than property changing hands. And when Kieran Blackthorn stepped forward to claim his purchase, when those cold fingers brushed against her wrist as he unlocked her shackles, she felt something inside her die. Not just her freedom, not just her future, but something fundamental, something that made her who she was. The part of her that believed she deserved love, deserved choice, deserved to matter to someone other than as a debt payment or a novelty to be owned. A root catches her foot and sends her sprawling, her palms scraping against the rocky ground as she hits hard. For a moment she lies there gasping, tasting blood and dirt, feeling the sleet soak through her thin dress and chill her to the bone. The howls are so close now she can hear individual voices in the pack behind her. They're playing with her. She realizes they could have caught her already if they wanted to. This is a hunt to them, and she's nothing more than prey to be run down for sport. The thought ignites something fierce and primal in her chest. She pushes herself to her feet, swaying slightly as the world tilts around her, and wipes the blood from her scraped palms on her dress. The contract crinkles against her ribs where she's hidden it, the only proof she has of what was done to her, what her own family allowed to happen. Her hands start to glow. It starts as just a faint shimmer around her fingertips, like moonlight caught in water, but the fear and rage coursing through her veins feeds it until silver light pulses beneath her skin like a heartbeat. This is what makes her valuable, what makes her different from every other wolf they could have bought and sold. The ancient bloodline that runs through her veins, older than memory, powerful beyond measure, and completely untrained. Not yet, she whispers to herself, the words torn away by the wind. I'm not ready. But ready or not, the power responds to her emotional state like a living thing. The silver glow spreads up her arms, and somewhere in the distance, lightning answers her call. The storm overhead intensifies, feeding off her energy, her desperation, her absolute refusal to go quietly into whatever cage they've prepared for her. She's never been able to control it properly. Her grandmother died when Syrah was still a child, taking the knowledge of their bloodline's gifts with her to the grave. Her parents were useless, her mother too afraid of what Syrah might become, her father too drunk to care about anything except his next bet. And the pack elders who should have taught her, should have helped her understand what she was, had taken one look at the silver fire in her veins and declared her too dangerous to train, too dangerous to love, too dangerous to keep, too dangerous for anything except selling off to the highest bidder when the debts came due. Thunder crashes directly overhead now, so close she feels it in her bones, and the lightning that follows illuminates the forest around her in stark black and white. For just a moment, she sees them shadows moving between the trees, eyes gleaming in the darkness, getting closer with every heartbeat. The Lycan King's personal guard, the wolves he trusts to bring back his property in one piece. Though she's starting to wonder if one piece is actually a requirement, the silver light around her hands flares brighter, responding to her spike of terror, and she has to clench her fists to keep from accidentally setting the whole forest on fire. That's happened before, when her emotions got too strong, when the power inside her demanded an outlet and she was too weak or too scared to stop it. Burned down her family's barn when she was 16 and caught her father betting away her mother's wedding ring. Turned 3 trees to ash when Marcus, her supposed mate, her destined partner, chose her younger sister instead. Your wolf is tainted, he'd said, looking at her like she was something diseased. That silver, it's not natural, it's wrong, wrong. The word had hit her like a physical blow, knocking the breath from her lungs and the hope from her heart. If her own mate couldn't accept what she was, who could? If the man the moon goddess herself had chosen for her found her repulsive, what chance did she have with anyone else? The rejection bond had snapped like a rubber band pulled too tight, leaving her hollow and aching and more alone than she'd ever been in her life. And her sister, sweet, normal, perfectly ordinary Emma, had just stood there and watched it happen, had even smiled a little, like she'd been waiting her whole life for Marcus to notice her instead. That was 6 months ago. 6 months of being the pack outcast, the reject, the girl with the cursed bloodline who couldn't even keep her own mate. 6 months of her father's gambling getting worse and worse as he tried to drown his shame in whiskey and cards. 6 months of debts piling up until the collectors came calling. And now here she is, running through a frozen forest with a blood-stained contract pressed against her heart and a pack of killer wolves on her trail. This is what her life has become. This is what she's worth. The sleet turns to proper snow now, fat flakes that stick to her eyelashes and make it even harder to see where she's going. Her dress, the same one she wore to the auction, the nicest thing she owned, is torn and filthy, offering no protection against the cold. Her feet are numb with frost and loss of blood, leaving her stumbling and clumsy when she needs to be swift and sure, but still she runs. Because the alternative is unthinkable. She knows what happens to wolves bought by the Lycan King. Some say he collects them for their bloodlines, breeding the most powerful together to create even stronger pups. Others whisper that he feeds off their energy, their life force, to maintain his own supernatural strength. And there are darker rumors, stories told in hushed voices about dungeons beneath his fortress where disobedient wolves are kept chained until they break whatever he wants with her, whatever he paid that fortune for. She knows it won't be pleasant. Men like Kieran Blackthorn don't spend that kind of money on something they plan to treat gently. Another memory flashes through her mind, his hand on her chin as the shackles fell away, tilting her face up so those predatory eyes could study her features. His thumb had brushed across her lower lip, and she'd felt power in that touch. Not the wild, untrained energy that lived in her blood, but something controlled, focused, deadly. Beautiful, he'd murmured, voice like gravel and honey, and completely untrained. How delightfully raw. The way he'd said that last word had sent ice through her veins. Like she was a piece of meat he was planning to carve up. Like he could see every vulnerability, every weakness, every place where she could be broken. Her hands flare with silver light again, brighter this time, and she has to stop and lean against a tree trunk while she fights for control. The bark scorches under her palm, blackened and twisted, and she jerks her hand away with a gasp. This is why she's dangerous. This is why everyone fears her. The power inside her responds to emotion, and right now she's drowning in terror and rage and heartbreak. The howls behind her change pitch, becoming more urgent, more focused. They've caught her scent trail in the snow. Whatever head start she had is evaporating fast. She pushes away from the ruined tree and stumbles forward again, her legs shaking with exhaustion and cold. How long has she been running? Hours? Days? Time seems meaningless out here in the storm, with death breathing down her neck and nowhere safe to go, because that's the real problem, isn't it? Even if she manages to escape the Lycan King's hunters, where can she go? Back to her pack, who rejected her, to her family, who sold her. She has no allies, no friends, no one in the world who would risk themselves to help her. She's completely and utterly alone. The thought should break her, should send her to her knees in the snow to wait for whatever fate the wolves behind her have planned. But instead, it ignites something fierce and primal in her chest. If she's alone, then she has nothing left to lose. If no one will save her, then she'll have to save herself. And maybe it's time to stop being afraid of what she is. The silver light spreads from her hands up her arms, and this time she doesn't fight it. The power feels like liquid moonlight in her veins, cold and beautiful and absolutely terrifying. It wants to be used, wants to protect her, wants to show these hunters exactly what they're trying to capture. Lightning splits the sky again, closer this time, and she swears she can feel the electricity dancing across her skin. The storm is responding to her, feeding off her energy and her emotions, growing stronger as her power grows. She's heard stories about her bloodline, whispered legends about women who could call down lightning and bend the very elements to their will. Luna, Argentum, they were called, daughters of the moon goddess herself. But those women were trained, prepared, taught to control their gifts from childhood. Syrah is flying blind, running on instinct and desperation, and that makes her infinitely more dangerous. To her enemies, to herself, to everyone. A branch snaps somewhere behind her, close enough that she can hear it over the wind. They're almost on her now. In minutes, maybe seconds, those hunters will burst through the trees and drag her back to their king in chains. Back to whatever hell he has planned for her, unless she makes a stand right here. The thought terrifies her almost as much as it thrills her. She's never used her power offensively, never turned it on another living being. The few times it's gotten away from her, she's only hurt herself or destroyed property. But these wolves hunting her, they're not innocent. They chose to serve a monster. They chose to hunt down a girl who's never done anything except be born with the wrong bloodline. Maybe it's time they learned what that bloodline can really do. She spins around to face the direction she came from, her back to a massive oak tree, silver light crackling around her like trapped lightning. Her dress whips around her legs in the wind, and her dark hair streams behind her like a banner. For the first time since this nightmare began, she's not running, she's making a choice. Come on then, she whispers to the darkness between the trees. Let's see what you're really made of. The words are barely out of her mouth when the first wolf breaks through the underbrush, a massive gray male with amber eyes and scars across his muzzle. He's followed by 2 others, then 3 more, until she's facing down half a dozen of the Lycan King's personal guard. They spread out in a semicircle around her, moving with the fluid grace of predators who know their prey is trapped, but they stop at the edge of the silver light radiating from her skin. Stop and stare with something that might actually be uncertainty flickering in their eyes, because they can feel it now, can't they? The power humming in the air around her, making their wolf instincts scream warnings. This isn't just some helpless girl they can drag back to their master like a sack of grain. This is something ancient, something that their DNA remembers even if their conscious minds don't understand. This is a Luna Argentum awakening, and awakening Luna Argentum are the most dangerous creatures in the supernatural world, the largest. Wolf, clearly the pack leader, shifts back to human form with a ripple of muscle and bone. He's tall and lean with tribal tattoos covering his arms and a face that's seen too much violence. When he speaks, his voice carries the authority of someone used to being obeyed without question. Enough running, girl. Our king wants you back. In one piece, but he didn't say anything about unharmed. The silver light around her flares brighter, and she feels the power building in her chest like a dam about to burst. The storm overhead responds, lightning flickering between the clouds like the sky itself is preparing for war. Your king, she says, and her voice carries harmonics that make the wolves flinch back a step. Bought a slave, but what he's getting is something very, very different. The contract against her chest seems to burn hotter, reminding her of everything that brought her to this moment. The betrayal, the rejection, the complete and utter abandonment by everyone who was supposed to love her. They made her into this. They forged her in fire and pain and threw away the mold. Now they get to live with the consequences. If tales of fierce love and forbidden power call to your soul, if stories of women who refuse to stay broken speak to the wildest parts of your heart, then join our pack by subscribing to Werewolf Shifter Romance Tales. Because here, in this sanctuary we've built together, every broken heart gets its fierce protector, every rejected soul finds their place to belong, and every girl who's been told she's too much, too dangerous, too powerful, discovers that those aren't flaws to be hidden, they're weapons to be wielded. Subscribe now, because this story is just beginning, and what comes next will either save her soul or consume everything she's ever loved. And honestly, right now, with silver fire dancing in her veins and thunder answering her call, even she doesn't know which one she's hoping for. The choice is hers. The power is hers. And for the first time in her life, that terrifies everyone except her. The lead wolf takes a step toward her, his lips pulling back to reveal canines that could tear through bone, and that's when the shadow detaches itself from the ancient oak behind him. One moment, there's nothing but darkness between the trees, and the next, Kieran Blackthorn steps into the circle of silver light like he's been watching this entire confrontation unfold. Like he's been waiting for exactly this moment to make his entrance. The wolves immediately fall back, their heads lowering in automatic submission to their alpha, but their eyes never leave Sarah's face, or more specifically, the power still crackling around her like contained lightning. You run beautifully, little wolf, Kieran says, his voice cutting through the wind and snow with disturbing ease. But you can't outrun what you owe me. His voice is exactly what she remembers from the auction, gravel and honey, dangerous and compelling, the kind of sound that could convince you to walk off a cliff if he asked nicely enough. But there's something else there now, something that wasn't present when he was coldly examining his purchase. An undertone of approval, satisfaction. Like seeing her cornered and glowing with untrained power is exactly what he hoped would happen. Syrah's hands clench into fists, silver fire dancing between her fingers, and she has to fight the urge to take a step back, not because she's afraid of him, though she absolutely should be, but because something deep in her chest responds to his presence in a way that makes her feel exposed, vulnerable, like he can see straight through to her soul and find all the broken pieces she's been trying to hide. His eyes are the same pale gold she remembers. But up close, in the stormlight and the glow of her power, she can see flecks of amber and bronze swirling in their depths. Predator's eyes, but not cold, not emotionless. There's heat there, interest, something that makes her pulse skip and her breath catch in her throat. Syrah Nightshade, he continues, moving closer with the fluid grace of someone who's never doubted his place at the top of the food chain. Daughter of the man who stole from my pack. Carrier of bloodline thought extinct for 3 centuries. The girl who's been breaking hearts and burning barns since she learned to walk. The casual way he lists her failures, her family's shame, her complete inability to control what she is, should humiliate her. Instead, it ignites something fierce and defiant in her chest. He knows everything about her, not just her name and her father's debts, but the personal details that even her own pack tried to forget. The rejection, the accidents, the way everyone she's ever loved has eventually chosen to love someone else instead. I've been watching you for 3 moons, he admits, circling her now like a shark scenting blood in the water, waiting for the debt to mature, waiting for your father's luck to finally run out completely, waiting for you to realize that running from what you are only makes you more dangerous, not less. 3 months. He's been watching her for 3 months, and she never felt it. Never sensed him or caught his scent or had any indication that the most powerful alpha in the Northern Territories was tracking her like prey. The thought should terrify her, but instead it sends a shiver down her spine that has nothing to do with the cold. How many times had he seen her at her weakest? How many nights had he watched her cry herself to sleep after another day of being invisible to everyone who mattered? How many moments of pain and vulnerability had he witnessed while deciding whether she was worth the fortune he eventually paid for her? You know about Marcus, she says, and it's not a question. Of course he knows. He seems to know everything else about her life. I know about the rejection, he confirms, his voice going soft and deadly. I know about your sister. I know about the fire you started in your rage, and the weeks you spent afterward convinced you were a monster who deserved to be alone. The silver light around her flares brighter, responding to the emotions his words drag up from the deepest parts of her heart. The humiliation, the self-loathing, the absolute certainty that she was broken in some fundamental way that made her unmovable. She'd spent so many nights after Marcus chose Emma wondering what was wrong with her. What defect in her soul made even her own mate turn away in disgust? Stop, she whispers, but he doesn't stop. He moves closer instead, close enough that she can see the scars across his throat, thin white lines that speak of violence survived, of someone who tried to kill him and failed, someone who got close enough to open his windpipe before he turned the tables and showed them why challenging the Lycan King was a mistake people only made once. I know, he continues relentlessly, that you blame yourself for their choices, that you've spent 6 months believing you're too dangerous to love, too broken to fix, too much for anyone to handle. And I know that's exactly the kind of thinking that makes untrained Luna Argentum burn entire cities to the ground. Luna Argentum. He says it like he's not just familiar with the term, but like he's been expecting to find one eventually. Like, discovering her bloodline wasn't a surprise, but a confirmation of something he already suspected. She belongs to me now, he says to his wolves, though his eyes never leave her face. Her father's blood debt transfers to her. Anyone who wants to contest that claim can discuss it with me personally. The casual way he refers to her as property should make her furious, should send the silver fire exploding outward in a wave of destruction that turns this entire stretch of forest to ash. Instead, she finds herself studying the way he positions himself between her and his own wolves, the subtle shift in his stance that puts him in a position to defend her if any of them decide to test his claim. He's not rescuing her exactly, but he's not letting anyone else hurt her either. I won't be your slave, she hisses, silver eyes flashing as power pulses through her veins like molten metal. The snow around her feet melts in a perfect circle, revealing dead grass that steams. In the sudden heat, Kieran's mouth curves in something that might charitably be called a smile, but it's all teeth and dark promise. Good, he growls, low and rough and entirely too appealing for someone who just bought her at auction like livestock. Slaves bore me to tears. They have no fire, no fight, no interesting ways to make my life complicated. He takes another step closer, close enough now that she can feel the heat radiating from his body, close enough to see that his scars don't stop at his throat. There are others, half hidden by his clothes, evidence of a life lived in violence, of battles fought and won through sheer stubborn refusal to die. But mates, he continues, voice dropping to a rumble that she feels in her bones, mates burn eternal. They challenge you, change you, make you into something better or destroy you completely in the attempt. They're dangerous and unpredictable and absolutely worth every moment of chaos they bring into your carefully ordered world. The word mate hangs between them like a blade, sharp and gleaming and impossible to ignore. Her wolf stirs beneath, her skin responding to something in his scent, his presence, his casual assumption that she could be anything more to him than a purchased novelty. But that's insane. He bought her, paid for her with cold cash to settle a debt. There's no destiny involved, no moon-blessed connection, just transaction and ownership. Except her wolf doesn't seem to care about logic. Her wolf is practically purring at his proximity, at the way his own beast rises to meet hers, at the scent of power and protection and deadly competence that clings to him like cologne. You don't even know me, she manages, though her voice comes out breathier than she intended. The silver light around her flickers and dims, responding to her confusion, her body's betraying reaction to his nearness. I know you burn yourself out trying to be smaller, he says simply. I know you apologize for taking up space in rooms where you have every right to exist. I know you've spent your entire life being told your power is too much, your emotions too strong, your very existence too dangerous for polite society. Each word hits like a physical blow, not because they're cruel, but because they're true. Because he sees her, really sees her in a way that no one else ever has. Not Marcus, who wanted her to be normal. Not her family, who wanted her to be invisible. Not her pack, who wanted her to be gone. I know, he continues, voice gentling slightly, that you've been waiting your whole life for someone brave enough to love a woman who could level mountains when she's angry and call down lightning when she cries. The snow has stopped falling around them, as if even the weather is holding its breath to see what happens next. The silver light emanating from her skin has stabilized, no longer flickering with her panic but glowing steady and bright as moonlight. She feels suspended between one heartbeat and the next, balance on the knife's edge between running and staying, between fighting and surrendering. And if you think, Kieran says, stepping close enough that she has to tilt her head back to meet his eyes, that I spent a fortune acquiring the last Luna Argentum just to keep her locked in a cage and admire her from a distance, then you understand nothing about what I am or what I want. His hand rises slowly, telegraphing the movement so she has plenty of time to pull away, to burn him, to show him exactly how dangerous it is to touch something that could turn him to ash without effort. Instead, she finds herself frozen as his fingertips brush against her cheek, tracing the line of the cut the branch left there. His touch is warm, careful, reverent in a way that makes her chest tight and her breathing shallow. There's power in his skin too, not the wild, untrained energy that lives in her blood, but something controlled, focused, deadly in its precision. Old magic, earned through pain and sacrifice and years of learning to be the kind of alpha that other alphas fear. You're bleeding, he observes, thumb brushing across the small wound with surprising gentleness. I heal fast, she whispers, though she makes no move to step away from his touch. The cut is already closing, silver light sealing the edges together, until only a faint pink line remains. I know, he says. Luna Argentum always do, along with a dozen other abilities you've never been taught to use properly. Powers that could reshape the supernatural world if they fell into the right hands, or destroy it if they fell into the wrong ones, she counters, echoing the warnings she's heard her entire life. Exactly. His smile this time is sharp and wild, and entirely too attractive, which is why it's a good thing they fell into mine. The arrogance of the statement should offend her, should send her power lashing out in indignation at his casual assumption of ownership. Instead, she finds herself studying his face, looking for signs of deception or manipulation and finding only honest desire. Not for her power, exactly, though he clearly recognizes its value, but for her. For the woman underneath the magic, the girl who's been running from herself for so long she's forgotten what it feels like to stand still. The debt, she begins. But he cuts her off with a shake of his head. Is between your father and me, he says firmly. You're here because I want you here. Because from the moment I heard whispers about a silver wolf in the mountains, I knew I had to find you. Because I've been waiting 28 years for the moon goddess to send me someone strong enough to stand beside me instead of behind me. 28 years. He's been alone for 28 years, ruling his territory with absolute authority, but no one to share the burden. No mate to anchor him, to balance him, to remind him that there's more to life than duty and power and the constant weight of keeping his people alive. The thought shouldn't move her, shouldn't make her heart ache for this dangerous stranger who bought her like property and talks about destiny like it's a foregone conclusion. But there's something in his eyes, loneliness, maybe, or recognition that calls to the broken places in her own soul. I could hurt you, she says, flexing her fingers so silver light dances between them. This power, I don't know how to control it. When I get angry or scared or good, he says again, and this time when he smiles, it's soft and genuine and absolutely devastating. I don't want you controlled, Lyra Nightshade. I want you exactly as you are, dangerous and powerful and completely untamed. I want the woman who burns barns when she's betrayed and calls down storms when she runs. He leans closer, close enough that she can feel his breath against her ear. Close enough that his scent pine and leather and something wild and masculine fills her lungs and makes her wolf practically vibrate with interest. I want, he murmurs, voice rough with promise, the Luna Argentum who's about to learn that being too much for everyone else just means she's exactly enough for me. The words hit her like a physical blow, not because they're cruel, but because they're everything she's been desperate to hear her entire life. Someone who doesn't want her to be smaller, quieter, less than what she is. Someone who looks at her power and sees potential instead of danger. Someone who might actually mean it when he says she's exactly enough. But trust doesn't come easily to hearts that have been shattered by the people who were supposed to love them most. They walk through the forest in silence, his wolves forming a protective perimeter around them as they head toward whatever fortress he calls home. Lyra keeps her distance, close enough that she can feel the heat radiating from his body, but far enough that she won't accidentally touch him if she stumbles. Her feet are still bleeding, leaving crimson drops in the snow, but she doesn't complain. She's endured worse pain than this, and showing weakness to the Lycan King feels like handing him a weapon he could use against her later. Her eyes keep drifting to his hands as they move through the darkness. They're larger than she expected, with long fingers and calluses that speak of manual labor despite his position. Scars crisscross his knuckles and climb up his forearms, some old and silver white, others newer and still pink at the edges. These aren't the soft hands of someone who's spent his life giving orders from a throne. These are the hands of a man who's done his own killing, his own fighting, his own bleeding. There's something oddly comforting about that. Whatever else Kieran Blackthorn might be, he's not a coward who sends others to do his dirty work. Why didn't you just kill my father? The question escapes before she can stop it, cutting through the quiet night like a blade. The blood debt. The moonstones. Death would have been simpler, cleaner, more final. He's quiet for so long she thinks he might not answer. When he finally speaks, his voice carries undertones of something that might be old pain, carefully buried but never fully healed. Death is too easy, he says simply. Understanding, that takes time. Takes watching someone live with the consequences of their choices, seeing how those choices ripple outward to hurt the people they claimed to love. There's history in those words, layers of meaning that suggest he's speaking from experience. Someone hurt him once, hurt him badly enough that he chose a slower, more complicated form of justice over simple execution. Someone he trusted, maybe even loved, who chose their own selfish desires over his well-being. She knows that particular flavor of betrayal intimately. 6 months ago, she thought she understood heartbreak. She thought being rejected by her destined mate was the worst pain a person could survive. She was wrong, but at the time, standing in the pack's ceremonial circle with Marcus's rejection burning through her chest like acid, it felt like the end of the world. "Your wolf is tainted, Syrah," he'd said, his voice carrying easily across the assembled pack members who'd come to witness what should have been a joyous mating ceremony. "That silver, it's unnatural, wrong. I can't bind myself to something that corrupted." The words had hit her like physical blows, each one stealing the breath from her lungs and the strength from her legs. She'd known Marcus since childhood, had grown up believing they were destined for each other, that the moon goddess herself had chosen them to be partners. The mate bond between them was supposed to be sacred, unbreakable, the foundation on which they'd build a life together. Instead, he'd looked at her like she was diseased. Like the silver fire in her veins was a contamination that might spread to him if he got too close. The pack elders had nodded their agreement, their faces grave and certain as they pronounced judgment on something they'd never tried to understand. "She carries the curse of the moon's shadow," Elder Matthias had declared, his voice booming across the circle. "The silver wolf is an abomination, a corruption of the natural order. No true wolf could bind himself to such a creature. Such a creature. Not a person, not a woman with feelings and dreams and a heart that was breaking into smaller and smaller pieces with every word. A creature. Something to be feared, avoided, cast out before it could infect the rest of them with its wrongness." Emma had been standing at the edge of the circle, beautiful and normal and everything Syrah wasn't. Her sister's wolf was pure white, elegant and graceful and completely conventional. No silver fire, no dangerous bloodline, no power that responded to emotion and turned destructive when she couldn't control it. Just a sweet, obedient girl who would make the perfect alpha's mate. Marcus had looked at Emma like he was seeing her for the first time, and Syrah had watched her entire future crumble to ash as recognition dawned in his eyes. The new mate bond formed between them instantly, snapping into place with an almost audible click that left Syrah hollow and aching and more alone than she'd ever been in her life. "I'm sorry," Emma had whispered later, finding Syrah crying in the ruins of what used to be their family's barn. The structure was still smoking from the silver fire that had exploded from her when the rejection bond finally severed completely. "I didn't mean for it to happen like this." But she hadn't tried to stop it either, hadn't refused Marcus's sudden attention or insisted that he honor his original commitment. She'd just stood there and let it happen, let her sister's life fall apart so she could have what she'd always secretly wanted. Their father had started drinking heavily after that, drowning his shame in whiskey and cards and increasingly desperate bets. How could he face the other pack members knowing his daughter had been rejected by her destined mate? How could he hold his head up when everyone whispered about the cursed bloodline running through his family? Syrah had tried to be understanding, had tried to forgive him for the nights he came home reeking of alcohol and failure, for the way he flinched when she touched him, for the gradually mounting pile of debts that accumulated every time he tried to bet his way out of his problems. She should have seen what was coming, should have realized that desperation makes people do terrible things to the ones they're supposed to protect, but she'd been too lost in her own pain to notice how far he'd fallen until it was too late. "The moonstones," she says now, the words feeling like ground glass in her throat. Tell me about the moonstones. Kieran glances at her, something that might be sympathy flickering in his golden eyes. 7 sacred artifacts, each one containing enough concentrated lunar energy to power protection spells for an entire territory. They've been in my family's vault for 3 generations, guarded by blood magic and ancient wards that should have made them impossible to steal, but my father managed it anyway. Your father had help, Kieran says, voice going cold and hard. Someone on the inside. Someone who knew exactly how to bypass the protections without triggering the alarms. Someone who understood the true value of what they were stealing. The implications hit her like a slap. Her father didn't just drunkenly stumble into theft. This was planned, coordinated, the result of careful manipulation by someone who wanted those stones badly enough to use a desperate man's shame as leverage. Each stone was worth a life. Kieran continues relentlessly. 7 stones, 7 deaths demanded by the old laws. I could have killed your father, your mother, your sister, 4 members of your pack, and still been within my rights under supernatural law. 7 deaths, 7 people dead because her father couldn't live with the shame of having a daughter who wasn't good enough for her destined mate. The thought makes her stomach twist with nausea and rage in equal measure. But you didn't, she manages. No, I offered an alternative. 1 life in servitude instead of 7 in death. Your father agreed immediately, without even asking which life I'd claim. His mouth curves in something too bitter to be called a smile. He assumed it would be his, right up until I said your name. The casual way he delivers this information, the revelation that her father sold her to save his own skin, that he agreed to trade her freedom for his life without hesitation, should break something inside her, should send her to her knees. With the weight of such complete and utter abandonment, instead, it ignites something fierce and primal in her chest, something that tastes like silver fire and sounds like thunder. Your daughter will serve my house until the debt is paid in full, she quotes, remembering the exact words from the contract pressed against her ribs. How long is that exactly? That, Kieran says, voice going soft and dangerous, depends entirely on how you choose to serve. The loaded way he says it sends heat curling through her belly, though she's not entirely sure why. There's promise in those words, possibility. The suggestion that maybe servitude doesn't have to mean slavery, that maybe there are other ways to pay debts, other forms of service that wouldn't leave her broken and hollow. I was born with silver flame in my veins, she says suddenly, the words spilling out before she can stop them. My grandmother told me stories about our bloodline before she died, whispered warnings about powers that had been sleeping for centuries. She said we were the daughters of the moon goddess herself, that our magic was older than werewolf law, older than pack hierarchies, older than almost everything supernatural creatures take for granted. Kieran's attention sharpens, focus narrowing to laser intensity as he listens to words that could be treason in the wrong ears. Luna Argentum claims of divine heritage have been used to justify rebellions before, to challenge the authority of alphas who rule through strength rather than birthright. She told me they would fear what they couldn't control. Syrah continues, voice barely above a whisper, that they would try to make me smaller, quieter, less than what I was meant to be. That they would call my gifts curses and my power corruption because acknowledging what I really am would threaten everything they've built their lives around. Her grandmother had been the last trained Luna Argentum, the final keeper of knowledge. That stretched back through centuries of persecution and hiding. She died when Syrah was 12, taking most of her secrets to the grave rather than risk them being used against her granddaughter. I can heal with my touch, Syrah admits, holding up her hands so the silver light dancing around her fingers is visible in the darkness. But I can also burn with my rage. I can call storms when I'm heartbroken and start fires when I'm angry and make the earth itself shake when I'm afraid. The power pulses through her as she speaks, responding to the emotions her words drag up. She's never said any of this out loud before, never admitted the full scope of what she might be capable of if she ever learned proper control. That's why Marcus really rejected me, she says, voice breaking slightly on her former mate's name. Not because my wolf was tainted, but because he could sense how much power I carried, because binding himself to me would have meant accepting that his mate was stronger than he was, more dangerous, more connected to the supernatural world's foundations than any alpha has a right to be. The trees around them rustled despite the lack of wind, responding to the energy rolling off her in waves. Kieran's wolves keep their distance, instincts warning them that they're in the presence of something far more dangerous than they initially realized. But Kieran himself moves closer, close enough that she can see the gold flecks in his eyes, close enough that his scent wraps around her like a blanket. Marcus was a fool, he says simply, a weak, frightened boy who couldn't recognize strength when it was handed to him on a silver platter. His loss, my gain. The casual certainty in his voice, the complete lack of fear or hesitation, does something strange to her chest, makes it tight and warm and full of possibility she's not ready to examine too closely. You're not afraid of what I am, she says. And it's not quite a question. I'm terrified, he admits, voice rough with honesty. But not of your power, Syrah. I'm afraid of what happens if I can't convince you to stay willingly. I'm afraid of what my life looks like if you decide I'm just another person trying to cage something wild and beautiful for my own purposes. The vulnerability in his words catches her off guard. This isn't the cold, calculating alpha who bought her at auction. This is someone who understands what it feels like to be alone, to carry burdens too heavy for one person, to want something desperately. Enough that the thought of losing it is paralyzing. I'm afraid, she whispers back, that if I let myself trust you, you'll eventually decide I'm too much trouble. That you'll look at me the way everyone else has and find me lacking. His hand rises slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away, before his fingers tangle gently in her hair. The touch is careful, reverent, like she's something precious that might break if handled roughly. Then I suppose, he says, voice soft but absolutely certain, we'll just have to be brave enough to find out together. The words hang between them, like a bridge waiting to be crossed, fragile and precious and terrifying in their honesty. Syrah feels something shift in her chest, some wall she's built around her heart cracking just enough to let light through. Not trust, not yet, but the possibility of it. The first tentative step toward believing that maybe, just maybe, she's found someone who won't eventually turn away. The forest changes as they walk deeper into Kieran's territory. The trees grow taller, older, their branches interwoven overhead, to form a natural cathedral that filters moonlight into silver patterns on the ground. The very air feels different here, charged with ancient magic, humming with power that makes her skin tingle and her wolf pace restlessly beneath the surface. Where are we going? She asks, though part of her already knows. There's something, a head calling to her bloodline, pulling at the silver fire in her veins like a magnet draws iron. Something that recognizes what she is and welcomes her home. Somewhere you need to see, Kieran says, voice gone soft with reverence. Somewhere that's been waiting for you longer than either of us has been alive. They crest a small hill, and Syrah's breath catches in her throat at what lies beyond. The moonfall shrine spreads before them like something from a dream. Ancient stone circles rising from the earth in perfect spirals that seem to pulse with their own inner light. 7 rings of standing stones, each one carved with symbols that hurt to look at directly, as if they contain too much meaning for mortal eyes to process. Between the stones grow trees unlike anything she's ever seen, silver bark that gleams like metal, leaves that chime like tiny bells when the wind moves through them, creating music that sounds like whispered prayers in a language older than words. At the center of it all lies a pool of what can only be described as liquid moonlight. The surface gleams and shifts like mercury, but with a warmth that speaks of life rather than metal. It never goes dry, Kieran had told her, and looking at it now she believes it. This isn't just water reflecting the moon above. This is something far more ancient, far more sacred. This is where the first Luna Argentum received her gift, Kieran says, voice barely above a whisper. Where the moon goddess herself reached down from the heavens and blessed a mortal woman with power beyond imagining. Where your bloodline began. Syrah's feet carry her forward without conscious thought, drawn by forces she doesn't understand, but can't resist. The moment she steps between the first circle of stones, everything changes. The carvings on the ancient monoliths burst into silver fire, illuminating symbols that seem to writhe and dance in the sudden light. Her own power responds instantly, erupting from her skin in waves that make the very air shimmer. But instead of the wild, uncontrolled energy she's used to, this feels focused, purposeful, like coming home after a lifetime of wandering lost. Ancient runes appear on her skin, burning silver lines that trace patterns across her arms, her throat, her face. They don't hurt, quite the opposite. They feel like benediction, like recognition, like finally being acknowledged for what she truly is. The markings pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat, and with each pulse, she feels power flooding through her veins in ways she's never experienced. The pool at the center of the shrine begins to ripple despite the lack of wind, its surface breaking into perfect concentric circles that spread outward like the splash from an invisible stone. The liquid moonlight glows brighter, casting everything in ethereal silver radiance that makes the world look like it's been touched by divinity. A voice whispers in the old tongue, words she's never learned, but somehow understands with perfect clarity. The silver moon rises again. Syrah stumbles backward, overwhelmed by the intensity of what's happening to her body, her power, her very soul. This place knows her, recognizes her, claims her as its own in ways that terrify and exhilarate her in equal measure. Breathe, Kiran says softly, moving to her side but careful not to touch her while the ancient magic courses through her system. Let it happen. Don't fight it. But before she can respond, before she can process what's happening to her, a figure emerges from the shadows between the silver trees. An elderly woman, bent with age but moving with surprising grace, her white hair braided with moonstone beads that catch and reflect the shrine's light. Her eyes are the same pale gold as Kiran's, but older, deeper, filled with knowledge accumulated over decades of watching and waiting. Grandmother, Kiran says, and there's genuine warmth in his voice for the first time since Syrah met him. I brought her, as you said I would. The old woman, the oracle. Syrah realizes with a start, approaches slowly, studying her with eyes that seem to see straight through to her soul. When she speaks, her voice carries the weight of prophecy, of words that have been waiting centuries to be spoken. The Luna Argentum shall return when darkness threatens the balance, she says, each word falling like stones into still water. She who was rejected shall become the chooser. She who was cast out shall reclaim her throne. Her silver flame will either save the wolf kind or consume them all. The prophecy hits Syrah like a physical blow, driving the air from her lungs and the strength from her legs. She sits down hard on the grass, staring up at the oracle with wide, disbelieving eyes. I'm nobody special, she whispers, voice breaking. Just a girl sold to pay a debt. I can't even control my own power, let alone save anyone. You've got the wrong person. The oracle's smile is soft and knowing and infinitely patient. The moon goddess writes her stories in scars, child. She chooses not the perfect, but the broken. Not the strong, but those who have learned strength through suffering. Not those who have never fallen, but those who have found the courage to rise. Syrah looks down at her own hands, at the silver light still dancing around her fingers, and feels the weight of destiny settling around her shoulders like a cloak. This can't be real. She can't be some prophesied savior, some chosen one, meant to tip the balance between light and darkness. She's just her, Syrah Nightshade, the rejected daughter, the girl with the cursed bloodline who spent her entire life being told she was too much. The darkness comes. The oracle continues, gaze turning distant as if she's seeing something beyond the present moment. Ancient things that have slept for millennia are stirring. Powers that predate wolf law, that existed before the first Alpha claimed dominion over his territory. They hunger for the world above, and only Luna Argentum fire burns hot enough to hold them back. Kiran moves closer, close enough that she can feel his body heat against her side, close enough that his presence steadies her spinning world. When she looks up at him, there's something in his expression that makes her chest tight, not fear, exactly, but a kind of desperate hope that terrifies her more than any threat ever could. "You've been having dreams," she says, and it's not a question. She can see it in his eyes, the weight of visions that have haunted his sleep, the knowledge that's been burning inside him for years. "Dreams where you save us all," he admits, voice rough with honesty. "Dreams where you stand between the supernatural world and annihilation, silver fire pouring from your hands like starlight-made weapon. Dreams where you choose to fight instead of run, where you embrace what you are instead of hiding from it. And dreams where I fail," she asks, though she already knows the answer from the way his jaw tightens. "Dreams where you watch us burn," he confirms. "Where the rejection, the pain, the years of being told you're wrong break something inside you that can't be fixed. Where you decide that a world that never wanted you doesn't deserve to be saved." The honesty in his words is brutal and beautiful and absolutely terrifying. This isn't about destiny or divine mandate or cosmic forces beyond her control. This is about choice. Her choice. Whether to let the pain define her or transcend it. Whether to become the savior or the destroyer. Whether to trust that maybe, finally, she's found people who won't eventually turn away. The Oracle watches this exchange with ancient eyes, sees the moment when understanding dawns in Syrah's expression. "You brought her here," she says to Kieran, "but the choice to stay must be hers. The choice to fight must be hers. The choice to become what she was born to be. That belongs to no one but her." Syrah's power pulses stronger in this sacred place. Fed by forces beyond her understanding, the silver light around her has grown so bright it illuminates the entire shrine, turns night to day, makes her look like she's been carved from moonbeams and starfire. She can feel potential in her bones, possibilities stretching out before her like paths through a forest. Save them all. Destroy them all. The choice is hers. "I brought you here for a reason," Kieran says, voice barely above a whisper. "The same reason I've been having dreams of you for years. The same reason I paid a fortune to buy you from men who didn't understand what they were selling. Not because I wanted to own you, but because I needed to know." "Know what?" she asks, though her heart is already racing with the implications. "Whether you choose to save us," he says simply, "or whether you decide we deserve whatever's coming." The weight of that choice, the responsibility of holding an entire world's fate in her scarred and silver-touched hands, should crush her. Should send her running back into the forest to hide from a destiny too big for one broken girl to carry. Instead, for the first time in her life, Syrah Nightshade feels like she might finally be exactly where she belongs. The question isn't whether she's strong enough. The question is whether she's brave enough. And as silver fire dances around her fingers and ancient prophecies settle into her bones like benediction, she thinks she might be ready to find out. The return journey to Kieran's stronghold passes. In charged silence, the weight of prophecy and possibility hanging between them like a live wire. Syrah's power has settled into a steady silver glow beneath her skin, no longer the wild, uncontrolled bursts she's used to, but something deeper, more focused. The shrine changed something fundamental in her, awakened pathways in her bloodline that had been dormant for centuries. She can feel Kieran's eyes on her as they walk, studying her profile in the moonlight, searching for signs of how the revelation has affected her. But she's not ready to talk about destiny or ancient prophecies or the choice that's been laid at her feet. Not when her entire understanding of herself has been rewritten in the space of an hour. The fortress appears through the trees like something from a fevered dream. Massive stone walls that rise from the earth itself, towers that scrape the sky, battlements lined with wolves whose eyes gleam amber in the darkness. This isn't just a home. It's a seat of power, a declaration that Kieran Blackthorn rules absolutely and brooks no challenge to his authority. The great hall buzzes with tension the moment they step inside. The Pack Council has assembled in Kieran's absence, 12 of the most powerful wolves in the Northern Territories arranged around a massive oak table that's scarred with centuries of use. Their voices rise and fall in heated argument, but the words cut off like a blade the moment they catch sight of Syrah. Elder Tobias rises from his seat at the far end of the table, his graying hair wild and his eyes burning with righteous fury. He's old enough to remember the stories, old enough to have heard first-hand accounts of what Luna Argentum can do when they lose control, old enough to be afraid. You brought the cursed bloodline into our sanctuary. He snarls, pointing an accusing finger at Kieran while his gaze remains locked on Syrah. Do you have any idea what you've done? What you've invited into our home? I've honored a blood debt, Kieran replies coldly, moving to stand beside Syrah, in a gesture that's both protective and possessive. Nothing more, nothing less. Her kind brought the shadow wars that killed thousands, Elder Tobias continues, his voice rising to carry across the hall. Luna Argentum power corrupts everything it touches, turns the natural order inside out until chaos reigns supreme. They're destroyers, not protectors. Syrah feels the familiar sting of being discussed like she's not standing right there, like her thoughts and feelings don't matter in the face of their fear. But this time, instead of shrinking back or trying to make herself smaller, she lifts her chin and meets Elder Tobias's gaze directly. I'm right here, she says, voice carrying clearly across the hall. If you have accusations to make them to my face. The simple act of speaking up, of refusing to be invisible, sends murmurs rippling through the assembled council members. This isn't the cowed, broken girl they expected. This is someone who's tasted her own power and found it good. She's here to fulfill her family's debt. Nothing more, Kieran states. But there's something in his tone that suggests even he doesn't entirely believe that anymore. Not after what happened at the shrine. Not after seeing her step into her birthright like she was born for it. Elder Tobias opens his mouth to respond, probably with more vitriol about cursed bloodlines and ancient disasters, but his words are cut off by a sound that makes every wolf in the hall freeze with primal terror, howling. But not the familiar voices of their pack members on patrol. This is something else entirely, something that speaks to the deepest, most primitive parts of their brains and whispers warnings about predators that hunt in eternal darkness. The great hall's windows explode inward in a shower of glass and shadow, as creatures that shouldn't exist pour into the stronghold like a living nightmare. Shadow wolves, beings of pure dark magic that exist in the spaces between light and darkness, drawn by power and sustained by fear. Their forms shift and writhe, like smoke given substance, eyes burning red as coals, fangs dripping with corruption that hisses when it hits the stone floor. The council members scatter, some shifting to wolf form in desperate attempts to fight, others simply running for exits that are already blocked by more shadow creatures. These aren't enemies that can be reasoned with or negotiated with. They're hunger given form, drawn by the awakening of Luna Argentum power like moths to flame. Lyra's silver fire responds instantly to the threat, erupting from her skin in waves that illuminate the chaos unfolding around them. The shadow wolves nearest to her recoil with shrieks that sound like metal scraping against stone, but they don't retreat. If anything, her power seems to drive them into greater frenzy. A normal wolf, one of Kieran's pack members, leaps at the nearest shadow creature and passes right through it, his claws finding nothing but empty air. The shadow wolf turns and backhands him across the hall with casual cruelty, sending him crashing into the stone wall with a sickening crack. They can't touch them. Syrah breathes, watching in horror as more pack members try and fail to engage. The creatures, normal wolves, no matter how strong or well-trained, can barely scratch beings made of pure dark magic. But Luna Argentum fire, that's different. Through the chaos, she catches sight of something that makes her blood run cold. A group of shadow wolves has cornered a cluster of pack pups in the far corner of the hall, young ones who were brought to witness what should have been a routine council meeting. The children huddled together, too terrified to shift, too young to understand why their parents' claws and fangs are useless against this enemy. Syrah could run. In all this chaos, with everyone focused on the attack, she could slip away and disappear into the night. Let them deal with the consequences of awakening, something they're not equipped to fight. Let them face the darkness alone while she finds somewhere safe to hide. The thought lasts exactly as long as it takes for the largest shadow wolf to advance on the pups, red eyes burning with hunger for innocence and terror. If I use my power, they'll know what I am, she tells Kieran, voice tight with the magnitude of the choice she's about to make. Once she reveals herself fully, there's no going back. No pretending to be normal, no hiding from what her bloodline represents. Kieran moves to stand back to back with her, his own wolf form rippling just beneath his skin as he prepares to fight creatures he can't actually hurt. When he speaks, his voice is rough with admiration and absolute certainty. Let them know, he growls. Let them see exactly what they've been too afraid to understand. The permission in his words, the complete lack of fear or hesitation, breaks something loose inside her chest. For the first time in her life, someone is asking her to be more, not less. To embrace her power instead of hiding it. To save lives instead of preserving feelings. Silver fire erupts from her hands like controlled lightning, streams of pure Luna Argentum energy that lance across the hall with deadly precision. The first shadow wolf dissolves instantly, its form unraveling like smoke in a hurricane. The second and third follow, their shrieks of agony echoing off the stone walls as they're reduced to nothing by power older than their corruption. The remaining shadow creatures freeze, suddenly aware that they're facing something that can actually hurt them. For a moment, the hall falls silent except for the crackle of silver fire dancing around Syrah's fingers and the labored breathing of injured pack members. Then the shadows flee, pouring back through the broken windows like oil running uphill, leaving behind only scorch marks on the stone and the acrid smell of burned darkness. Syrah stands in the center of the ruined hall, silver light still pulsing beneath her skin, and realizes that every surviving member of the Pack Council is staring at her with expressions of horror and awe. The secret she spent her entire life trying to hide has been revealed in the most dramatic way possible. She's the Luna Argentum reborn, someone whispers, voice carrying clearly in the sudden silence. Elder Tobias struggles to his feet, blood running from a cut on his forehead, his eyes blazing with fanatical hatred. You see? He shouts, pointing at her with a shaking hand. This is what I warned you about. Her very presence draws the darkness to us. She's a beacon for every evil thing that crawls through the shadows. The accusation hits like a physical blow, not because it's cruel, but because part of her wonders if it might be true. The shadow wolves came after her power awakened. They attacked because of what she is, what she represents. How many people are going to die because she exists? She just saved your pups, Kieran snarls, moving to stand between Elder Tobias and Syrah like a living shield. Saved all of us from creatures that would have torn this place apart stone by stone, and brought them here in the first place. Tobias shoots back. The shadow wolves were drawn by her awakening. They came because of what she is. The argument that follows is vicious and swift, voices raised in anger and fear as the council splits along factional lines. Some support Kieran's decision to harbor her, others demand her immediate exile. The hall fills with accusations and counter-accusations, with ancient grievances and political maneuvering that has nothing to do with what just happened and everything to do with who gets to hold power. Through it all, Syrah stands silent and still, silver light gradually fading from her skin as the magnitude of what she's revealed settles around her shoulders. She's not just the Luna Argentum anymore. She's the Luna Argentum who brought shadow wolves to the strongest pack in the Northern Territories. The girl whose very existence puts everyone around her in danger. She leaves at dawn, Elder Tobias declares, voice ringing with finality, or we call for your removal as Alpha. The council will not allow this creature to remain in our territory. Kieran's jaw tightens, hands clenching into fists as power radiates from him in waves that make the air itself heavy. For a moment, Syrah thinks he might challenge the entire council right here, might start a civil war over her right to exist in his space. She stays, he says, voice cold and absolute. My word is law here. But doubt creeps into his golden eyes as he looks around the hall, seeing the fear and hatred in faces he's trusted for years. She can practically hear the calculations running through his head. How many allies would he lose in a fight over her? How many pack members would die in a civil war? How much of his territory would burn while he defended a girl who might bring more shadow wolves with every passing day? The realization that he's actually considering their demands, that he might choose his pack over her, shouldn't hurt as much as it does. She's known him for hours, not years. She has no claim on his loyalty, no right to expect him to sacrifice everything for someone who's brought nothing but trouble to his door. But it still feels like another rejection, another reminder that when forced to choose, people will always pick safety over her. "I'll go," she says quietly, voice cutting through the arguing voices like a blade. "I won't be the reason your pack tears itself apart." The hall falls silent, all eyes turning to her as she makes the choice that will define everything that comes next. Kieran's expression shifts from calculation to something that might be panic, like he didn't expect her to make the decision for him. "Syrah," he starts, but she shakes her head. "They're right," she says, looking around the hall at faces filled with fear and relief in equal measure. "The Shadow Wolves came because of me, because of what I am, and they'll keep coming as long as I'm here, as long as my power continues to grow." She meets Kieran's eyes, sees the conflict warring in their golden depths, and feels something inside her chest break clean in two. For a moment, standing in that sacred grove with prophecy settling into her bones, she thought she'd found her place, thought she'd discovered people who might actually want her to stay. But the world fights back against change, against power that threatens the established order. And right now, she's too dangerous to love, too volatile to trust, too much for anyone to handle, even him. "Dawn," she says simply, and turns toward the ruined windows without looking back. "I'll be gone by dawn." The silver light fades completely from her skin as she walks away, leaving nothing but a girl who's learned once again that being powerful doesn't mean being wanted. And in the silence that follows her exit, the sound of her footsteps echoes like a countdown to something none of them are prepared to face alone. She doesn't make it far. Syrah has barely cleared the stronghold's main gates when she hears footsteps behind her, measured and determined despite the chaos she's left in her wake. She doesn't turn around, doesn't slow her pace, because she knows if she looks at Kieran's face right now, she might do something stupid like change her mind, like believe that maybe this time could be different. "Where will you go?" His voice carries easily through the night air, rough with exhaustion and something that might be regret. Does it matter? She keeps walking, focusing on putting one foot in front of the other instead of the way her chest feels hollow and aching. "Somewhere far from here. Somewhere the shadow wolves won't follow. Somewhere I can't hurt anyone else just by existing." His hand closes around her wrist, gentle but firm, stopping her mid-stride. The contact sends silver sparks dancing across her skin, her power responding to his touch in ways that terrify and thrill her. When she finally turns to face him, the expression in his golden eyes makes her breath catch. "There's somewhere you need to see first," he says, voice soft but absolutely certain. "Before you decide, before you disappear into the night and leave me wondering what might have been." She should say no, should pull free of his grip and keep walking until she's far enough away that her presence can't endanger his pack. But there's something in his voice, a vulnerability she hasn't heard before, that makes her hesitate. She should say no, should pull free of his grip and keep walking until she's far enough away that her presence can't endanger his pack. But there's something in his voice, a vulnerability she hasn't heard before, that makes her hesitate. "Kieran, 1 hour," he says, thumb brushing across the pulse point in her wrist where silver light dances beneath her skin. "Give me 1 hour to show you something, and then if you still want to leave, I won't stop you." The request is so simple, so reasonable, that refusing it would be cruel. And despite everything that's happened tonight, despite the fear in his counsel's eyes and the doubt she saw creeping into his own, she can't bring herself to hurt him like that. 1 hour, she agrees, though her voice comes out smaller than she intended. He leads her away from the stronghold, through forest paths she didn't know existed, deeper into territory that feels wild and untamed despite belonging to him. The trees here are older, their branches intertwining overhead to block out most of the moonlight, creating a natural tunnel that feels separate from the rest of the world. The sound of rushing water grows louder as they walk, until finally they emerge from the forest onto a ledge overlooking a waterfall that cascades down granite cliffs into a pool far below. But it's not the view that takes her breath away, it's what lies hidden behind the falling water. A cave mouth, barely visible through the curtain of liquid silver, accessible only by a narrow path that hugs the cliff face. Kieran moves along the ledge with sure-footed confidence, clearly having made this journey many times before. Syrah follows more carefully, acutely aware of the drop beneath them and the way the waterfall's mist makes the stones slippery. The cave beyond is nothing like what she expected. Ancient wolf paintings cover every surface, stories told in ochre and charcoal and what might be crushed gemstones that gleam in the light of the fire burning in the center of the space. These aren't crude cave drawings but sophisticated art, detailed and beautiful and clearly created by someone who understood both technique and meaning. The wolves depicted here are magnificent, some running through starlit forests, others standing, proud beneath full moons, still others dancing with figures that glow with unmistakable silver light. Luna Argentum legends, she realizes with a start. These paintings tell the stories of her bloodline, preserved in secret for generations. This is where I come when the crown gets too heavy, Kieran admits, settling beside the fire with a weariness that speaks of burdens carried too long alone. When the weight of keeping everyone alive, keeping everyone safe, feels like it might crush me completely. Syrah moves deeper into the cave, silver-tipped fingers tracing the painted figures with reverent care. The woman in the largest mural stands at the center of a circle of wolves, silver fire dancing around her hands, her face serene and powerful and absolutely beautiful. This is what Luna Argentum were meant to be, not cursed, not dangerous, but guardians, protectors. The balance between light and shadow. How long have you known? She asks, voice barely above a whisper, about what I am, what I could become. Since I was 16, he says, surprising her with the immediate honesty. The night my brother tried to kill me for the alpha position, she turns to look at him, really look, and sees the way firelight plays across the scars on his throat. They're old, healed white lines that speak of violence survived, but up close she can see how deep they go. How close he came to dying. Marcus, she breathes, remembering his mention of the name earlier. Your brother's name was Marcus too. Different Marcus, Kieran says with a bitter laugh. Though apparently I have terrible luck with that particular name. He was my twin, my other half, the person I trusted more than anyone else in the world. Right up until his claws found my windpipe, the pain in his voice is raw, unhealed despite the years that have passed. She knows that particular flavor of betrayal intimately, the way it hollows you out, makes you question everything you thought you knew about love and loyalty and the people who are supposed to stand by you no matter what. What stopped him? She asks, though part of her already knows the answer from the way his eyes go distant and haunted. Luna Argentum fire, he says simply. A woman appeared in the forest where we were fighting, silver light pouring from her. Hands like liquid starlight. She healed my throat, saved my life, and then disappeared before I could even thank her. The last Luna Argentum, my grandmother told me later. The final keeper of knowledge that was supposed to die with her. Syrah's hand rises unconsciously to her own throat, remembering her grandmother's stories about the healing properties of their bloodline. She's gone now? Has been for 12 years, Kieran confirms. But not before she told me that someday, when the darkness gathered again, another would come. A Luna Argentum who would have to choose between salvation and destruction. A woman who would either save us all or watch us burn. The weight of prophecy settles around her shoulders again, heavier now in the intimate confines of this sacred space. She traces another painting, a woman standing alone on a mountaintop, silver fire streaming from her hands toward a sky full of shadow, and feels the magnitude of what's being asked of her. I trusted him completely. Kirin continues, voice going soft and broken. Shared everything with him, my fears, my dreams, my plans for our pack's future. Right up until the moment he decided that future didn't include me. Now I trust no one. Except somehow, I want to trust you. The admission hangs between them like a bridge, fragile and precious and absolutely terrifying. Sira turns from the paintings to study his face in the firelight, sees the vulnerability there beneath the alpha authority, the loneliness that comes from carrying responsibilities too heavy for one person. My grandmother said our bloodline was cursed to love too deeply, she says, settling beside him near the fire. The flames cast dancing shadows on the cave walls, making the painted wolves seem to move and breathe. That every Luna Argentaman history died protecting someone who couldn't love them back. Her fingers trace patterns in the dirt between them, silver light following the movement like phosphorescent ink. Every single one of us fell for someone who saw our power as a tool, to be used rather than a gift to be cherished. Men who wanted what we could do for them, but not who we were underneath it all. Maybe that's why Marcus rejected me, she continues, voice barely above a whisper. Maybe he could sense what I was becoming, what I would eventually be capable of. Maybe some part of him knew that binding himself to me would mean accepting a mate more powerful than he was. Kirin shifts closer, close enough that she can feel the heat radiating from his body, close enough that his scent pine and leather and something wild and masculine fills her lungs with every breath. You're not cursed, Sira, he says, voice rough with conviction. You're luminous, like moonlight given form, like starfire made flesh. Anyone who looks at you and sees danger instead of beauty is a fool who doesn't deserve what you're offering. The space between them crackles with electricity, charged with possibility and want and the kind of tension that makes breathing difficult. She can feel the pull between them, stronger than gravity, more compelling than logic. Her wolf recognizes something in his, responds to it in ways that have nothing to do with power or prophecy and everything to do with the simple, terrifying truth that some souls are meant to find each other. Their faces are inches apart now, close enough that she can see gold flecks in his eyes, close enough that she can feel his breath against her lips. Her silver eyes reflect the firelight, making her look ethereal and otherworldly and absolutely beautiful. I see you, he whispers, thumb rising to trace the line of her cheek with devastating gentleness. All of you, the power and the pain, the strength and the fear, the woman who burns barns when she's betrayed and the girl who cries silver tears when she thinks no one is watching. And I'm not afraid. The words hit her like absolution, like forgiveness for sins she didn't know she was carrying. No one has ever seen her completely the light and the shadow, the divine and the broken and chosen to stay anyway. No one has ever looked at the fullness of what she is and found it not just acceptable but desirable. She leans into his touch, eyes fluttering closed as his thumb traces across her lower lip. The contact sends silver sparks dancing across her skin, her power responding to his proximity in ways that feel less like magic and more like coming home. Sira, he breathes, her name a prayer on his lips. The moment stretches between them, balanced on the knife's edge of possibility. She can feel his heartbeat against her chest, can sense the careful control he's maintaining over his own wolf, can taste the want and need and desperate hope in the air between them. And then a howl echoes through the night outside, distant but unmistakably searching. The pack is looking for them, probably sent by the council members who want to make sure she actually leaves at dawn. The sound breaks the spell between them, like glass shattering, reality crashing back in to remind them both of all the reasons this is impossible. Sira pulls back, though every instinct she has screams at her to close the distance instead. Her breathing is unsteady, her heart racing with want and fear in equal measure. Can I trust you? She whispers, the question torn from somewhere deep in her chest, where hope and terror live side by side. Kirin's eyes search her face, looking for something she's not sure she knows how to give. When he speaks, his voice carries the weight of absolute truth. Trust me enough to let me choose you. he says simply. Trust me to see the difference between wanting your power and wanting you. Trust me to stand between you and every person who would reduce you to what you can do for them instead of who you are underneath it all, even if it costs you everything. She asks, because that's what loving someone like her means. Loss, sacrifice, choosing her over safety, over certainty, over everything else. His smile is soft and sure and absolutely devastating. Especially then, the hell comes again, closer. This time, and they both know their stolen hour is almost over. Soon, they'll have to return to the stronghold, to face the council's demands and the impossible choice between her presence and his pack's safety. But for now, in this cave full of ancient stories and firelight, with silver magic dancing between them and the taste of possibility on their lips, they allow themselves to believe that maybe love can be stronger than fear. Maybe some things are worth fighting. For after all, the return to the stronghold feels different this time. Wrong. The guards at the gates stand too straight, their eyes too alert, like they're expecting something specific to happen. The wolves patrolling the battlements move with purpose rather than routine, and there's a tension in the air that has nothing to do with the shadow wolf attack earlier. Syrah's power stirs uneasily beneath her skin, responding to some threat she can't identify but can definitely feel. Her wolf paces restlessly, hackles raised, instincts screaming warnings that her human mind struggles to interpret. Something's wrong, she murmurs to Kieran as they approach the main entrance. This doesn't feel right. His jaw tightens, golden eyes scanning the too quiet courtyard with the wariness of someone who's survived multiple assassination attempts. I know, stay close to me. But staying close to him won't save her from what's waiting inside. The Great Hall has been transformed in their absence. Every member of the Pack Council stands arranged in a perfect semicircle, their faces grave and determined. But it's not their expressions that make Syrah's blood run cold, it's what Elder Tobias holds in his gnarled hands. Chains. But not ordinary metal. These are ancient things, forged from silver and moonstone, and something that makes her soul recoil in recognition. Runes cover every link, carved deep and filled with what looks like dried blood, pulsing with their own malevolent energy. She can feel their purpose from across the room, the way they hunger for her specifically. Luna Argentum binding chains, made to hold women like her, to drain their power, to break them completely. Did you think we didn't know what you were from the moment you arrived? Elder Tobias asks, his voice carrying across the hall with disturbing satisfaction. Did you actually believe we were that naive? Syrah takes a step backward, her hand reaching instinctively for Kieran's, seeking the anchor of his presence. But instead of comfort, she finds his fingers rigid and cold, his entire body radiating tension that has nothing to do with protective instincts. Your father didn't steal those moonstones, Tobias continues, advancing slowly with the chains draped across his arms like precious fabric. We paid him to bring them back. Every single one of them. The words hit her like physical blows, rewriting everything she thought she understood about her situation. The theft that ruined her family, the gambling debts that spiraled out of control, the blood debt that brought her here, none of it was accidental. The moonstones were bait, another council member explains, voice clinical and cold. Planted in your pack's territory generations ago, waiting for the Luna Argentum bloodline to resurface, waiting for someone like you to activate their resonance. Syrah's mind races, connecting dots she should have seen earlier. Her father's sudden run of bad luck at the gambling tables. The convenient appearance of buyers willing to pay premium prices for stolen goods. The way Kieran seemed to know so much about her before they'd ever met. For centuries, we feared your return would end Wolfkind's dominance, Tobias says, close enough now that she can see the fanatical gleam in his eyes. Your ancestors nearly destroyed us once. We won't let it happen again. This is insane. Syrah breathes, looking around the circle of faces for any sign of dissent, any indication that someone might speak up for her. I've never done anything to threaten you. I saved your pups. You exist, Tobias snaps. That's threat enough. Luna Argentum power grows stronger with every generation that passes. You're already more powerful than any who came before, and you're not even fully awakened yet. The blood debt was a lie. The auction was a sham. Everything that brought her here, everything she's endured, was orchestrated specifically to get her into this room, in these chains, at their mercy. Her eyes find Kieran's across the space that suddenly feels vast and unbridgeable. He's standing perfectly still, his face a mask of careful neutrality that she's never seen before. This isn't the man who held her by the fire, who traced her cheek with devastating gentleness, who promised to choose her over everything else. This is the Lycan King, calculating and cold and absolutely in control. Kieran, she says, his name breaking on her lips like glass. Tell them they're wrong. Tell them this isn't what you wanted when you bought me. All eyes in the room turn to their alpha, waiting to see which side he'll choose when forced to pick between his pack and the woman who's turned his carefully ordered world upside down. The silence stretches between them, heavy with expectation and the weight of impossible choices, and Syrah watches, heart crumbling to ash in her chest. As doubt creeps into his golden eyes, he doesn't move to defend her, doesn't speak up to contradict his counsel's accusations, doesn't take a single step in her direction to show where his loyalties lie. He just stands there, frozen between two futures, while she realizes with devastating clarity that when forced to choose, he's already made his decision. I'm sorry, he whispers, the words barely audible but carrying easily in the absolute silence. I'm so sorry, Syrah. But he doesn't move to help her. The apology shatters something fundamental inside her chest, something that had been carefully rebuilt during their hour in the cave. The part of her that had dared to hope, to trust, to believe that maybe this time someone would choose her over their own safety. Elder Tobias steps forward with the chains, but before he can reach her, another figure emerges from the shadows at the back of the hall. The Oracle, Kieran's grandmother, moves with purpose rather than the frail uncertainty she'd shown at the shrine. The prophecy speaks of salvation or destruction, the old woman says, her voice carrying none of the warmth or wisdom from before. But prophecies can be guided, shaped, made to serve those clever enough to understand their true meaning. Syrah stares at her in growing horror as understanding crashes over her like ice water. You were never trying to help me. The shrine, the awakening, was necessary to bring your power fully online, the Oracle confirms with clinical satisfaction. We needed you at full strength before we could begin the harvesting process. Better to end the Luna Argentum line forever than risk our extinction. Harvesting. They don't just want to kill her. They want to drain her power, steal it for themselves, use her divine heritage to strengthen their own bloodline while leaving her an empty husk. 28 years I've been planning this, the Oracle continues, moving to stand beside Elder Tobias with the chains. 28 years of watching and waiting for the right combination of desperation and power to walk into our territory. Your father was so easy to manipulate, so eager to believe that stealing from us would solve his problems. The chains feel heavier now, more oppressive, as if they're already wrapped around her throat. Ancient magic radiates from them in waves that make her skin crawl and her power recoil in instinctive terror. The blood debt, the auction, even your rejection by that pathetic excuse for an alpha, all carefully orchestrated to bring you here broken and vulnerable, ready to trust the first person who showed you kindness. She looks at Kieran again, searching his face for any sign that this isn't what he wanted, that he's as horrified by this revelation as she is. But his expression remains carefully neutral, giving nothing away. Did you know? The question tears from her throat like broken glass. From the beginning, did you know what they were planning? His silence is answer enough. Elder Tobias lunges forward with the chains, but the moment the cursed metal touches her skin, everything changes. Silver fire erupts from her body like a nuclear explosion. Waves of pure Luna Argentum energy that hit every wolf in the room with the force of a hurricane. Bodies fly backward, slamming into stone walls with sickening cracks. The ancient chains glow white-hot in Tobias's hands before he's forced to drop them with a scream of agony. Syrah rises from the floor where she'd been kneeling, her entire body blazing with silver light that turns night to day inside the great hall. Her eyes burn like molten moonlight, and when she speaks, her voice carries harmonics that make the very stones tremble. "You want to see what I am?" she snarls, power building around her like a storm about to break. "You want to know what Luna Argentum can really do when you push us too far?" The entire stronghold shakes as her rage awakens fully, ancient stones groaning under pressure they were never meant to withstand. Windows explode outward in showers of glass. Tapestries burst into silver flame. The very air itself becomes charged, with enough energy to stop hearts. But the chains, those cursed, blood-soaked chains, begin to glow with their own dark purpose. The runes carved into each link flare to life, responding to her power by activating binding spells that have waited centuries to claim a Luna Argentum victim. The chains snake through the air like living things, wrapping around her wrists and throat with supernatural speed. The moment they make contact, agony shoots through her system as the ancient magic begins its work, not just binding her, but draining her, pulling the silver fire from her veins like a leech drawing blood. She screams, the sound echoing off the stone walls with enough force to crack mortar. Her power flickers and dims as the chains tighten, ancient runes pulsing brighter with every ounce of energy they steal. But Luna Argentum don't break easily. Using every last reserve of strength she possesses, Syrah channels her remaining power into one final, desperate surge. The chains crack, their runes flickering as her energy overwhelms their binding spells for just a moment, long enough for her to tear herself free and stumble toward the ruined windows. Blood runs from the wounds where the chains cut into her skin, but she doesn't stop, can't stop. Behind her, she can hear Elder Tobias shouting orders, hear the Oracle screaming about securing the asset, hear the sounds of pursuit as they realize their prey is escaping. She makes it to the window, balanced on the sill with wind whipping through her hair and a drop of at least 50 feet yawning beneath her. For a moment, she looks back one last time, searching the chaos for Kieran's face. She finds him standing exactly where she left him, golden eyes wide with something that might be horror or regret, his hands hanging useless at his sides while his pack prepares to hunt her down like an animal. "Find me," she gasps, the words torn from her throat by wind and pain and the last dregs of hope dying in her chest. "When you remember who you really are." Then she jumps. The last thing she sees before darkness claims her is his face, beautiful and broken and full of choices he's too afraid to make. The last thing she hears is the sound of her own heart shattering. One final time. 3 days pass in a blur of pain and fury and power that threatens to consume everything in its path. Syrah barely remembers the fall from the stronghold window, or the way her battered body hit the rocky outcropping below before tumbling into the icy river that runs along the fortress walls. She doesn't remember dragging herself to shore, silver fire cauterizing her wounds even as her consciousness flickered in and out like a dying flame. What she remembers is the rage, pure, crystalline fury that burns through her veins like molten starlight, transforming pain into purpose, betrayal into strength. Every lie they told her, every moment of false kindness, every second she spent believing that maybe this time someone would choose her, all of it feeds the fire growing in her chest until she feels like she might explode from the sheer force of it. She finds shelter in a cave system miles from Kieran's territory, deep enough underground that no scent or sound can betray her presence. Here, in the darkness and solitude, she finally stops running from what she is. For 3 days, she doesn't fight the silver flame, doesn't try to control it or contain it or make it smaller for other people's comfort. She lets it burn through her completely, lets it rewrite her from the inside out, lets it show her exactly what Luna Argentum power looks like when it's not filtered through fear and self-doubt. The transformation is agony and ecstasy in equal measure. Every cell in her body rebuilds itself, strengthened by divine fire. Her wolf grows larger, more magnificent, radiating power that would make even the strongest alpha think twice about challenging her. Her human form becomes something luminous and terrible, beautiful in the way that storms are beautiful, awe-inspiring, and utterly dangerous. By the third dawn, she's no longer the broken girl who jumped from that window. She's something else. Entirely. Something that the supernatural world hasn't seen for centuries. She's Luna Argentum awakened. The sound reaches her even through the earth, and stone howls of terror and pain carried on the wind from the direction of Kieran's stronghold. Not the voices of shadow wolves this time, but regular pack members crying out in agony and desperation. The sound cuts through her meditation like a blade, dragging her back to awareness of the world beyond her cave. By the time she emerges into daylight, she can smell the smoke and blood on the air. The attack is massive, coordinated, nothing like the small incursion 3 nights ago. Shadow wolves pour across Kieran's territory in waves, their forms blotting out the sun like a living eclipse. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all converging on the stronghold with single-minded purpose, without her power to drive them back. The regular wolves are being slaughtered. Syrah reaches the battlefield just as Kieran's outer defenses crumble completely. She crests the ridge overlooking his territory and sees carnage spread below her like a vision from hell. Bodies litter the ground, too many of them small, too many of them young. The shadow wolves show no mercy, no discrimination between warrior and civilian. At the center of the chaos stands Kieran himself, blood streaming from dozens of wounds, his golden wolf form surrounded by enemies on all sides. He fights with desperate fury, but he's outnumbered 50-1. Every shadow wolf he destroys is replaced by 2 more, and his pack, what's left of it, is falling back toward the stronghold in panicked retreat. For a moment, she considers letting it happen, letting the pack that betrayed her face the consequences of their choices, letting the man who stood silent while they chained her watch his world burn. Then she sees a child, a little girl, maybe 7 years old, cornered by 3 shadow wolves near the ruined gates. The same child who hid behind her mother's skirts when Syrah first arrived, all wide eyes and innocent curiosity. The decision makes itself. Syrah steps onto the battlefield, and everything changes. Her silver wolf form materializes in a burst of light that turns night to day across the entire valley. She's magnificent, larger than any alpha, her coat gleaming like liquid mercury, silver fire dancing around her paws with every step. Power radiates from her in waves that make the very air shimmer, and when she throws back her head and howls, the sound carries harmonics that speak to something primal and divine. Every creature on the battlefield freezes. You wanted to see what a Luna Argentum could do. Her voice carries across the chaos, no longer entirely human, but something far more ancient and terrible. You wanted to know what happens when you push divine bloodlines too far? The shadow wolves nearest to her take uncertain steps backward, suddenly aware that they're facing something infinitely more dangerous than the regular wolves they've been slaughtering. This isn't prey. This is apex predator given form, the balance between light and shadow made manifest. Syrah doesn't fight the silver flame anymore. She becomes it. Ancient words of power spill from her lips in the old tongue, syllables that predate werewolf law and pack hierarchies and every petty fear that drives supernatural politics. The language of the moon goddess herself, carried in her bloodline like genetic memory, waiting for this moment to be spoken again. The moon responds to her call despite the daylight sky, its presence suddenly visible overhead like a silver coin pressed against blue glass. Lunar light pours down in visible streams, bathing the battlefield in radiance that makes the shadow wolves scream and writhe as their forms begin to destabilize. Her voice carries the authority of divinity when she speaks again. I am Luna Argentum, awakened. I am the daughter of moonlight and starfire, the balance that holds shadow and light in equilibrium. And you have forgotten your place. Every shadow wolf within miles simply ceases. They don't die so much as unravel, their dark forms dissolving like smoke before wind until nothing remains but empty air and the acrid smell of burned corruption. Hundreds of them, gone in an instant, erased by power that burns too bright for their stolen existence to withstand. The regular wolves stare in stunned silence, some cowering, others showing throat in instinctive submission to something far above them in the supernatural hierarchy. Even Kieran has shifted back to human form, golden eyes wide with awe and terror as he watches the woman he betrayed command forces beyond his comprehension. But Syrah's attention has moved beyond the battlefield, beyond the immediate threat, to something far more dangerous stirring in the shadows at the edge of perception. The ancient moonstone at the heart of Kieran's territory begins to resonate, sending pulses of power deep into the earth. Dormant ley lines that have slept for centuries suddenly blaze to life, connecting this awakening to other hidden Luna Argentum sites across the continent. The very landscape transforms as nature responds to her call. Dead grass springs to silver-touched life, withered trees burst into bloom, and the air itself becomes charged with renewal and possibility. She can feel others awakening, distant echoes of her own bloodline, women who carry dormant Luna Argentum heritage suddenly finding their power called to wakefulness by her display. The world is changing, rebalancing itself after centuries of supernatural politics and manufactured fear, and something ancient and terrible notices. As the last shadow wolf dissolves into nothingness, laughter echoes across the battlefield. Not the sound a throat could make, but something that seems to come from the darkness between spaces, from the void that exists in the gaps between reality. A figure materializes from pure shadow, tall and imposing, wearing the shape of a wolf, but wrong in ways that hurt to perceive directly. His form shifts and writhes like smoke-given substance, eyes burning with stolen starlight, and when he speaks, his voice carries the weight of eons. Impressive, Malakar says, the name carrying power that makes the ground beneath their feet tremble. You think your little light show impresses me, child? The Void Alpha, the original corruption, the first wolf to trade his soul for power beyond mortal comprehension. Syrah recognizes him from her grandmother's most terrifying bedtime stories, the monster that Luna Argentum were created to hold in check, the darkness that waits in the spaces between worlds for any crack in reality's foundation. I've been hunting your bloodline for 1,000 years, he continues, circling the edge of the battlefield like a shark scenting blood. Every Luna Argentum who's ever lived, I've watched them fall, watched them love unwisely, trust completely, and die protecting people who feared what they were. The pieces fall into place with horrible clarity. The shadow wars that decimated her ancestors weren't random conflicts. They were orchestrated by this creature, manipulated from the darkness to turn the supernatural world against its own protectors. He's the one who taught wolves to fear Luna Argentum power, who planted the seeds of doubt and terror that grew into centuries of persecution. You made them afraid of us, Syrah breathes, understanding flooding through her like ice water. You're the reason they hunt us, chain us, try to drain our power for themselves. Fear is such a useful tool, Malakar agrees with satisfaction. Turn predator against protector, make the guardians into the enemy, and suddenly the darkness has nothing standing in its way. Your ancestors were so easy to manipulate, all that divine compassion, all that need to save everyone, even those who would destroy them. His attention shifts to Kieran, who stands frozen at the edge of the transformed battlefield. Just like this one manipulated you, used your loneliness, your desperate need for acceptance, to draw you exactly where we needed you to be. The implication hits her like a physical blow. Kieran's interest in her, his carefully calculated rescue, even their connection in the cave, how much of it was real, and how much was orchestrated by forces beyond either of their understanding. The chains were just the beginning, Malakar continues, advancing slowly with predatory confidence. Drain your power to strengthen more conventional wolves, then use that enhanced army to finish what I started 1,000 years ago. The end of Luna Argentum, the end of divine interference, the beginning of an age where shadow reigns supreme. Two powers face each other across the scarred battlefield, silver moonlight versus consuming darkness, creation against destruction. The fundamental forces that have shaped reality since the beginning of time. End this now, Malakar offers, voice gone soft and reasonable. and I'll let your precious pack live. Walk away, let the darkness have what it's owed, and I promise their deaths will be quick. Lyra looks around the battlefield at faces filled with terror and awe, at children who cower behind their parents, at wolves who've spent 3 days learning exactly what happens when they reject divine protection. Some of them tried to chain her. Some of them stood silent while others betrayed her. Some of them would probably do it again if given the chance, but some of them are innocents. Some of them are children who deserve the chance to grow up in a world where light holds darkness in check. Silver fire dances around her fingers as she meets the Void Alpha's burning gaze directly. Counter-offer, she says, voice carrying harmonics that make reality itself shiver. You leave, go back to whatever hole in existence you crawled out of, and I let you live. Malakar's laughter shakes the very foundations of the world. Oh, child, you have no idea what you're facing. No, Lyra agrees, power building around her like a storm about to break. But I'm about to find out. The battle between light and shadow, between creation and void, between love and fear, is about to begin, and for the first time in her life, Lyra Nightshade isn't running from what she is, she's embracing it completely. The first clash between silver fire and void darkness sends shockwaves across the battlefield that crack stone and split the earth itself. Lyra's power meets Malakar's corruption in an explosion of light and shadow that turns the air itself into a weapon, and in that moment, time seems to pause between one heartbeat and the next. Kirin stands at the edge of the transformed battlefield, golden eyes wide with something that might be terror or awe or desperate recognition, watching the woman he betrayed fight for the pack that rejected her. Blood still streams from his wounds, his body bearing the marks of a battle he was losing until she arrived like vengeance wrapped in starlight. She could have let them all die, should have, by any reasonable measure of justice. They chained her, drained her, used her trust against her in the cruelest way possible. They stood silent while their leaders planned to harvest her power like grain from a field, reducing centuries of divine heritage to a resource to be consumed. But here she stands anyway, silver fire pouring from her hands in streams that hold back an ancient darkness, fighting not because they deserve it but because it's who she is at her core. Because Luna Argentum loved to deeply, protect to fiercely, forgive to completely for their own good. The question hangs in the air between them like a blade waiting to fall. Would you have chosen her, or feared her like the rest? Kirin's hands clench into fists as he watches power beyond his comprehension flow through the woman he'd started to love, the woman he'd failed when she needed him most. Every instinct he has screams at him to move, to act, to throw himself between her and the void creature trying to unmake reality itself. But what could he possibly do against forces that reshape the world with casual thought? What could any of them do except watch and pray that mercy wins over justice? Is she the savior they needed, or the destruction they always dreaded? Lyra stands between two worlds, now human enough to love, divine enough to destroy, balanced on the knife's edge. Between salvation and annihilation, she could end them all with a thought, could let her rage at their betrayal burn through her until nothing remains but silver ash and the echo of power misused. The capacity for that level of destruction lives in her blood, in the divine fire that responds to emotion and grows stronger with every hurt she's endured. She could end them all. But love makes her vulnerable. In her silver eyes lies the choice that will reshape their world. Not just this pack, not just this territory, but the entire supernatural order that's built itself on fear of what she represents. The old ways are dying in the clash between light and shadow, and what rises from their ashes depends entirely on the decision burning in her chest like a second heart. Will mercy triumph? Or will betrayal finally claim its due? The battle rages around her in waves of impossible energy, but her attention keeps drifting to Kirin's face, to the man who held her by firelight and promised to choose her over everything else, who whispered words of love and then stood silent while his pack prepared to drain her dry. The man who could have been her mate, her anchor, her reason to fight if only he'd been brave enough to mean what he said. the contradiction tears at her even as she battles cosmic forces. Part of her wants to hate him for his cowardice, wants to let the betrayal poison everything beautiful they built in stolen moments. But another part, the part that glows with divine fire and sees truth in all its painful clarity, recognizes the fear that paralyzed him. The impossible choice between the woman he was falling for and the pack he'd sworn to protect. She understands it, forgives it even. But understanding doesn't erase the wound his silence carved into her soul. The void pulses around Malakar's form, reaching for her with tendrils of pure negation that would unmake her on a molecular level. But Luna Argentum fire burns brighter than absence, hotter than entropy, and her power holds the darkness at bay through sheer force of will. Choose, she whispers, the word carried on silver light to every corner of the battlefield. Not just to Kieran, but to every wolf watching this cosmic drama unfold. Choose fear or love. Choose safety or growth. Choose the comfortable lie that power corrupts, or the terrifying truth that sometimes the rejected rise to become exactly what the world needs. If this tale of silver fire and impossible choices has lit something inside your soul, if stories of women who refuse to stay broken speak to the wildest parts of your heart, then you understand what's at stake in this moment. You know the ache of being too much for the people around you, the pain of loving someone who can't quite love you back, the fury that comes from being told your very existence is a threat to the natural order. If you believe that even the rejected can rise to claim their destiny, that every broken heart carries the seeds of transformation, that love is always worth fighting for even when the odds seem impossible, then subscribe to Werewolf Shifter Romance Tales. Because here, in this sanctuary we've built together, we tell stories that burn brighter than moonfire and cut deeper than any blade. Join our pack, where every heart finds its fierce protector, where every wound becomes a source of power, where every girl who's been told she's too dangerous discovers that being too much for some people just means she's exactly enough for the right ones. Here, we believe in love that transforms rather than diminishes. We champion women who call down lightning when they cry and start fires when they rage. We celebrate the divine feminine in all its terrifying, beautiful, world-reshaping glory. In the space between heartbeats, between silver flame and consuming shadow, between love and fear and the choice that defines everything that comes after, a story writes itself in starlight and scars, a tale of power claimed and destiny embraced, of hearts that love too deeply and souls that burn too bright for ordinary cages. This is what happens when the rejected stop running and start fighting. When the broken discover that their cracks are where the light gets in. When the cursed realize that maybe their bloodline isn't corruption, maybe it's evolution. Will you stand with the Luna Argentum, or will you turn away like the rest? Will you choose the comfortable darkness of fear, or the terrifying brilliance of transformation? Will you believe that some loves are worth reshaping the world for? Or will you let another divine flame be extinguished by those too afraid to burn? The choice is yours. The power is yours. The story is yours to claim. And in the silver fire dancing between Syrah's fingers, in the impossible courage it takes to love people who might not love you back, in the moment when destiny and desire collide in an explosion of light that will either save everything or destroy it completely, your answer writes itself across the stars. The silver fire builds to a crescendo that threatens to tear reality apart at the seams, Syrah's power clashing against Malakar's void in waves that reshape the very fabric of the world. Light and shadow battle for supremacy while the earth trembles beneath their feet, and for a moment, it seems as though the ancient darkness might finally be pushed back into whatever hell spawned it. Then something changes. A howl echoes across the battlefield, not from any throat that walks the earth, but from somewhere far deeper, far older, carrying harmonics that predate wolfkind itself. The sound rises from the bones of the world, ancient beyond measure, powerful beyond comprehension, and absolutely, impossibly wrong. Both combatants freeze. Syrah's silver fire flickers as recognition dawns in her divine awareness. This isn't the voice of any creature she knows, any power she's encountered, any force that should exist in the waking world. Malakar's void form wavers, genuine fear creeping into his burning eyes for the first time in 1,000 years. That's impossible, he whispers, voice cracking with something that might be terror. They're supposed to be sleeping. The bindings should hold for another century at least. Deep beneath their feet, something stirs. The ancient moonstones scattered across Kieran's territory begin to pulse in unison, their light growing brighter and more urgent with each passing second. But this isn't the gentle lunar radiance Syrah remembers from the shrine. This is harsh, desperate illumination, the frantic glow of warnings ignored, of seals beginning to crack under pressure they were never meant to withstand forever. Understanding crashes over Syrah like ice water as pieces of a puzzle she didn't know existed suddenly click into place. The moonstones weren't just Luna Argentum artifacts passed down through generations. They weren't simple repositories of power or sacred focal points for ritual magic. They were prison stones. The Luna Argentum weren't just guardians. She breathes horror and a warning in her voice. We were jailers. For centuries, her bloodline hadn't just protected the supernatural world from threats like Malakar. They'd held something far worse in check, something so dangerous that it required divine fire and ancient magic working in perfect harmony to keep it locked away from the world above. And now, with her power awakened and the careful balance of centuries disrupted, those bindings are failing. The ground beneath the battlefield cracks open in a spider web of fissures that reveal glimpses of silver light for below, not the warm radiance of moonfire, but something cold and alien and utterly inimical to everything that lives and breathes and hopes. Through those cracks comes a voice that speaks in harmonics older than recorded history. The Silver Guardian awakens. It says, words carried on currents of power that make the air itself shiver. But she is not the first, nor shall she be the last. Malakar's form begins to dissolve at the edges, his stolen power no match for whatever force is stirring in the depths. This isn't over, he snarls at Syrah, but his voice carries desperation now rather than confidence. You have no idea what you've unleashed. The true pack rises. The ancient voice continues, growing stronger as more cracks appear in the earth. And the age of scattered wolves ends. The children of the first magic return to reclaim what was taken. The battlefield erupts in silver light so bright it burns afterimages into everyone's vision. And when it fades, Malakar is gone, fled back to whatever shadow realm spawned him, leaving only the acrid smell of burned void and the echo of threats yet to be fulfilled. But the voice from below continues speaking, words that reshape understanding and rewrite prophecy with casual authority. She was never the weapon, it whispers, and the sound carries to every corner of the transformed landscape. She was the key, and now the door stands open. Syrah staggers as the implications hit her. Everything she's been told about her purpose, about Luna Argentum destiny, about her role in the cosmic balance between light and dark, all of it has been incomplete. She wasn't born to fight creatures like Malakar. She was born to unlock something far more fundamental, far more dangerous, something that's been waiting in the deep places of the earth for the right combination of power and circumstance to set it free. Around the battlefield, the surviving wolves stare in stunned silence as silver light begins to emanate from the cracks in the ground. But it's Kieran who draws her attention. Kieran, whose golden eyes are beginning to glow with the same silver radiance that flows through her veins. The mate bond. It's activating despite everything that's happened between them, despite the betrayal, and the pain and the choices that nearly destroyed them both. Whatever force is rising from below recognizes their connection and feeds it power, transforms it into something that transcends individual will or personal grievance. Syrah, he whispers, her name carrying harmonics that make her bones ache with recognition. His eyes burn like molten moonlight now, and she can feel his consciousness brushing against hers in ways that should be impossible without a completed bond. The ancient voice speaks one final time before fading back into the depths. In the shadows of her power, older magics wake. The first children stir in their diamond prisons. And somewhere in the deep places of the earth, the ground seals itself with a sound like thunder, cutting off the voice mid-sentence, but not before one last whisper escapes. The first Luna. Argentum opens her ancient eyes. Silence falls across the battlefield like a shroud, broken only by the sound of labored breathing and the distant crack of settling stone. Syrah stands in the center of it all, silver fire still dancing around her fingers, staring at the sealed earth with growing dread. Whatever she's awakened, whatever she's unlocked with her display of power, it's bigger than shadow wolves and void creatures and the petty politics of supernatural law. It's older than civilization, deeper than memory, more dangerous than anything the modern world has prepared for. And it's free now, thanks to her. The age of hiding is over. The time of scattered packs and isolated territories has ended. Something vast and ancient and utterly alien to everything they understand about their world is rising from the places where it was buried, and when it finally breaks free completely, nothing will ever be the same. In the silver fire dancing between her fingers, in the glow beginning to kindle in Kieran's transformed eyes, in the cracks that spider web across the earth like prophecy made manifest, the future writes itself in starlight and shadow. And somewhere far below, in darkness deeper than graves, something that was old when the world was young slowly opens eyes that burn with the cold fire of dying stars. The real story is just beginning.